Hello and welcome to Speak and Jay. I'm sitting here today in the beautiful Loews Theater in Journal Square in Jersey City. This beautiful theater was opened in September of 1929 and closed in 1986.
Yep.
I'm here today with Colin Egan, who is the head of the Friends of the Loews Theater, correct?
Correct.
Good title. And Colin, it's a pleasure to have you today here with us. And what we'd like to do is tell the story of the Loews Theater just prior to your taking over briefly, and then telling us about the current state of where the Loews is today in regard to this rift with the city. And so the paper said something about the city is taking you guys to court.
Well, actually, we had to take the city to court because, in a nutshell, the city is trying to push us aside or completely out of the picture in terms of running the Loews.
And why is that?
That's a good question. I'd have to speak on behalf of the mayor to answer that. I think he doesn't seem to believe in the process that we're supposedly in partnership with the city over to develop this theater.
Right, so the city is presenting you with a legal challenge with that regard, and you guys are in court now, is that it?
That's correct.
Okay. So when you guys took over, and obviously you were running it for the last 20 years or so, is that correct?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. We got into the picture when the building was closed and it was going to be torn down. And at that point, it was a derelict building. And it took from 1987, which is when I got into this, to 1993 just to stop the wrecking ball. From 1993 to 2001, there was the problem of getting the Loews open again. We had helped get a $1 million grant for the Jersey City Economic Development Corporation to stabilize this building, not really open it again, just keep it from falling apart. And the city matched that grant. They were very generous, so it was a $2 million match. But it wasn't enough, $2 million total, I should say, but it wasn't enough to get the place open and operating, which was the goal. What we began in 1995 was to transform our advocacy group from just saying, oh, save the Loews, into a group of people who actually came in and renovated it and did work to get it open. So from 1995 to 2001, that was our focus. We didn't have a lease on the building at the time. We had no control of the building. We were doing that just basically as good citizens on a handshake with the city that owned the building. In 2001, our work had progressed to the point where we could begin to use the building. We were able to have events here in the lobby, and we were able to use the auditorium to a minimal extent to do films and some shows. But we needed a lot more work to be done, and we needed some, frankly, help from the landlord, from the city, the owner of the building. From 2001 to 2004, we tried to talk with the city about getting a lease, some sort of control, a plan for moving forward. Finally, in 2004, we got that lease. So in many ways, we've only been in charge of the theater and running it for 10 years under that lease.
Legally?
Legally.
Right.
We'd been doing work before that, but legally and in terms of its current level of operations, you really have to go to 2004.
But recently, I mean, the news came out that the city was, the city announced rather that they were going to have the redevelopment agency designate a developer, is that it?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
They're looking for
an overseer, other than you.
They're looking to basically give the theater to a for-profit theater operating company.
And where would that leave the Friends of the Loews, actually?
Pretty much out of the picture.
Right.
I mean, the mayor talks about us doing some events here, but he doesn't understand how art centers, which is what this is supposed to be, work. Art centers work by having the entity that's in charge run it, bring in some kind of some shows that make money, and it helps support the operation, including shows that don't make money. If we're just here doing a few shows, I don't have the economic ability to even do those few shows. So essentially the mayor is saying, thank you, but goodbye.
Goodbye, yeah. Well, that's sad in and of itself. So it forces you really, the Friends, to meet the city in court and argue, your case versus their case and so on. But still, at the end of the day, there are things that the city is projected for the Journal Square area, including the development of 3 buildings across the street from the Loews and so on, and they see this as a great, revitalization of the square area, and even, you know, labeling the Loews Theater as the next PNC in New Jersey. You know.
Well, I just have to say that the city is talking about that now. I was the one who started talking about it in 1987, that this building was important to reviving Journal Square. I mean, I'm a Hudson County kid. I remember when the square was the center of our universe. It needs to be, again, it needs to be a regional hub, and one of the things we talked about was the Loews can do that. I'm sort of amused that the mayor is now saying the development community is telling him he needs to get rid of FOL to bring in bigger acts. When we started, the development community was saying, oh, let's tear down the Loews. So I think we have a bit of credibility in terms of the argument of what the Loews can do for Journal Square.
Well, I think it's also understood that the city has been somewhat heavy-handed in their approach to you, in that they've made unannounced visits to the theater and so on.
Yes,
you know,
during this whole process where they were issuing what they call an RFP, request for proposals, they've just been coming in, sometimes unannounced, sometimes telling us to be here and turn the lights on, essentially to cooperate in our own replacement. And it's been unfortunate because Friends of the Loews is, you know, we think a resource, a good citizen, if you will, for Jersey City. And we regret that the city feels it should be treating us this way.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, what type of remediation would be required to get the Loews Theater as it is now up to a, you know, the code standard? I understand that the upper tiers of the theater are still not been rehabilitated.
Yes.
And that's going to take a large amount of money.
Yes. Well, if you go back to our lease from 2004, in the lease, the city specifically said that in order for the Loews and Friends of the Loews to do more here, this building would have to be brought up to the city's own building codes. And in specifics, that means sprinklers, standpipes, emergency lighting, smoke detectors, fire escapes repaired so they're working, and a few other things such as doors have to close properly and things like that. All of that means that when that's taken care of, the theater can be used to its full occupancy, which is about 3,000 seats, which means you can bring in the kind of shows that Mayor Phillips says, and by the way, we've always said we want at the Loews, in addition to what we're doing now.
So, you know, like over the last 10 years, obviously, there have been a lot of events here that have captured the public's eye and have actually, you know, stimulated the thought process for people, the new-coming people into Jersey City, and seeing this as a, you know, the hope, one of the anchors for Journal Square as it is. So that if, obviously, the square is not what it was in 1950 or, you know, prior to that when it was really in its heyday, for those who were never here, and you said you were a Hudson County person, for those who were never here during that period of time would never know the vitality that the Loews gave and stimulated the what you call the nightlife in Jersey City and so on, you know. And so on. We had 3 theaters here at that time. We had the Stanley, which is just across the street. Fortunately, is still standing and is under the you know, the leadership of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then the long gone State Theater around the corner. But the Loews Theater really is a beautiful, one of the best theaters still intact to this degree in the United States.
Yes.
And it's a gem. And I know that you had this growing support from that new population coming in. And from people that we've talked to, they seem kind of disappointed that Mayor Phillips is actually taking this approach with you. Because people in general understand that you are, you know, the guiding light for the theater over these years.
Well, we're disappointed too, and I need to make one thing clear. Mayor Phillips graciously talks about Colin and Patty Jordan, and we've certainly been leaders of the effort, or leaders of the organization, but there is an organization here. Friends of the Loews is a remarkable entity. It is a nonprofit corporation legally, but it is largely staffed and operates with volunteers. And these are people who are born and bred Jersey City, newcomers to Jersey City, and even people who don't live in the city, who believe in what we're doing, who understand the value of this building on many levels, and are willing to donate their time and money to do things for which we don't, at the moment anyway, have money to pay. That's a tremendous organization and a tremendous resource. And I think a lot of people who come here and follow the story understand that's a resource that should be allowed to develop further. just as is our plan. That's the plan with our lease with the city, to allow FOL to grow into be even bigger and stronger organization, but always with its local community roots and leadership of this building.
That's well said. So what do you think, what is going to happen in the next few months, Colin? This is the beginning of June, the beginning of summer. What's going to happen over the next few months that's going to decide in your mind where this thing is?
There's litigation, and that will probably go back and forth for a while. Unfortunately, that's the nature of litigation. We're still hoping that the mayor will come around. He's gone through this RFP process, and we'll see what results he's gotten. I think it will be very telling to see where in this process they claim the money for renovating this theater is going to come from. I know the mayor is hoping that the respondents are going to say they'll be providing it, but what we'll have to do is look at the RFP and see what that means. Are they really writing checks, or are they just promising to pay something back from projections of operation that may or may not be real? We hope the mayor will see that and then begin to realize what we're talking about is a far more realistic, far more broad-based way to operate this theater. We all have worked with and tried to work with the kind of promoting operations that have responded to this RFP, and they've always come back and said, we can't do anything here in the theater's current condition. We think that the mayor will ultimately realize that it's not a choice between having Friends of the Loews and a multi-discipline arts center on the one hand and working with a Live Nation or AEG on the other. It's you have the local management, and then they work with these corporations to let them do what they do best, big concerts, while we also have things like Stage Fest, our films, the local community programming, and ensure that this space is something for Jersey City. We hope that when the mayor sees the RFP's responses, he'll understand what we're saying. If not, we'll have to continue to try and convince him.
Mm-hmm. And what amount of money do you have in mind would actually bring this theater to to full code standard and operating capacity?
I'll be honest, I'll have to go through the numbers again. We'll back it down. Right now, the current estimate for making everything better than new again is $22 million, and that will continue to go up over time. I would say a safe estimate for doing code work and a few other things that would be good to do is between $5 and $8 million. It's not a ton of money. It's money, but it's not a ton of money. What we would propose is if the city, as it's supposed to, puts in that money or finds that money with us over time through additional grants and fundraising, much more of the additional work will be done. I'd also like to do something that's part of our lease that's been totally forgotten and ignored. In our lease, there's supposed to be funding to bring in an independent, outside arts management expert, no one who has a brief or something to sell. And they'll work with us to look at the economic projections and determine if this theater can operate in such a way, and I'm not convinced it can, that you could take out a loan for certain amounts of the renovation, which is essentially what the RFP process is projecting. I'm not sure that can be done, but because I think everything should be double-checked by fact-checked, I'd like this to be looked at. If it can, if I'm wrong and the theater can support that kind of operation, then beyond the 5 or 8 million, you can talk about debt service for some of the other work. If I'm right, then you have to do it through grants and fundraising. That's the safe and practical and reasonable way to go forward with this.
Well, I do understand, Colin. Anyway, in any event, the Friends is continuing to be the guardian of the Loews Theater in the interim. And as an example, tonight you have the Preservation Awards dinner.
The Landmarks
here.
Conservancy will be here
Right.
for, I think this is their 11th or 12th year.
Right.
We have our films the following Friday and Saturday. Next week we have, for I think, again, the 10th or more year, we have the Jersey City Arts High School. We'll have their annual end-of-year art show here in the lobby. And we have a graduation from Anthem Institute, the local business college. And then after that, we have something called PonyCon. It's a group of people who are dedicated to remembering a certain TV show of their youth, and they're going to have the Northeast meeting, and this is actually a big deal here next weekend. So this theater is quite active despite all of its problems. When we got our lease, the city had admitted that until the code work we were talking about was done, we couldn't do any more. We were doing about 30 events a year that year. Today, we're doing over 80 events a year. So despite the fact that the city hasn't done what it was supposed to do and helped us get this building up to code, we're doing a lot more. And we continue, and we intend to continue to do just that.
Well, you know, it's also interesting to note that, you know, Mayor Phillips, who was a young man, was a councilman for 8 years prior to becoming mayor, elected last year. But, you know, there was every hope that this, a new mayor would be, you know, have a very conciliatory attitude toward you guys and work with you. And I certainly, you know, we on Speak NJ would certainly encourage him to think about that, because it's not just us, it's not Colin or myself, it's a whole army of people here in Jersey City and throughout the metropolitan area who know what the Loews is, know its history, and want to see it, you know, successfully rehabilitated and become, you know, the gem that it once was. I mean, it still is a gem, but to become the operating gem that it could be for the future. And I think that would tie hand in hand with the proposed development site across the street. And just to comment on the side, there are a number of things here in Journal Square that, you know, that bear commenting on in recent history. One, of course, was the removal of the Peter Stuyvesant statue nearby in Bergen Square, which was another a gem, you know, an artistic gem, just taken from us, and now its future is uncertain, possibly moved to another site other than where it was originally. Also, the opening of the Apple Tree House, which is another beautiful building on Academy Street, just south of here. And people are always talking about that, and it's a shame that here in the 12th night of the 12th year of the Preservation Awards dinner and so on, that we're still talking about this in this fashion, you know, that we have to, you know, mention. The statue is not the biggest thing in the world. The Apple Tree House is not the Loews Theater. These are things that should have been done to complement, to be little, you know, window dressing on the side, you know, for the Loews and so on. But these are things I think all of the people in Jersey City are keeping their eye on, and we certainly urge the city, urge Mayor Phillips to reconsider his stand on the Loews and to assist you people, you know, to assist you guys in getting this thing done and making it the beautiful gem that it was.
We would look forward to that.
Okay. Anyway, continuing on, Colin, a question I have for you is regarding monies. You know, has the Friends of the Loews come up with some grants and so on? And
Yes, and I should actually preface this by saying it's very hard to do fundraising when your partner in a project, in this case the city or landlord, isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It's an automatic deal breaker when you go to a lot of foundations and individuals. But we were fortunate to get two very generous grants from the Hudson County Open Space Trust Fund, from Hudson County. They kind of know the situation, so despite the issue with the city, they wanted to help. The first was $600,000 for air conditioning. The building needed new air conditioning. And even in our lease with the city, we were required to at least apply to the county for that. And we did, and we got that grant in the first round of the Open Space Trust Fund. Unfortunately, right after that, the city challenged our lease the first time. This would be 2005. And that challenge put working on that grant on hold for several reasons. A few years later, despite an ongoing difference with the city, the county stepped up again, and we got a $185,000 grant to replace the side doors. If anyone's ever walked through the alley in Journal Square, they see the rotting old doors, or they saw them anyway. They had to be replaced for code issues to make them fully functional for emergency egress. Even though we got that second grant, we were still at loggerheads with the city at that time. Finally, in 2009 and 10, when the city admitted the lease was valid and wanted to work with us, they asked if they could become joint grantees with us from the county. And we agreed as a sign of good faith. We also agreed that the city would provide some additional monies for the air conditioning because the costs had escalated, and the city was going to do the several $1 million worth of other code work we were talking about. Unfortunately, the city never secured the UEZ monies, urban enterprise zone monies, it was supposed to for any of that. And then the state essentially confiscated all undesignated UEZ monies from Jersey City and everybody else. Jersey City lost $11 million in UEZ monies. And this is in 2011, and at that point the city told us, well, you're out of luck for the extra money for the air conditioning, so why don't you ask the county if they can reprogram that money for some of the building code issues that the city was supposed to fix but had lost its money for. And we agreed, and the county very generously allowed that. So the monies that we got from the county for the air conditioning were reprogrammed to be spent on restoring the front doors to the Loews. I mean, they look nice now, but they don't function well. They're not really what they should be for code safety. The county was going to give us money in that grant for standpipes, the hydrants in the building. They were going to pay for new emergency lighting. They were going to pay to overhaul the ventilation system, the fans in the building for health, and they were going to do some work on the stage for safety as well. And in addition, we had the $185,000 for the side doors. That grant was put into effect with the city, and the doors are now just finished, and they're wonderful. They look great and they work well. The rest of that work, the front doors, all the other things I just said, from the first grant that was reprogrammed, the city has been going back and forth with us on. There were MUA issues about water for the hydrants in the building, things like that. They actually did go out to bid for the front door work, and we're preparing to go to bid for all the rest. They've got a contract for the front door work. It was the city council passed it. But Mayor Phillips has told us he's refusing to go forward with any of the work. He just doesn't want to do it right now. Supposedly he hopes to get economies of scales at some point later on by doing that work as part of a bigger contract. But we've pointed out to him, this is for safety work. You don't wait for safety work. We need it done now. And also there's a real possibility the county may take the grant back. It's an old grant. We're now not performing under the grant. We may lose it. And the mayor just hasn't responded to this. He seems to act as if it's a city's grant without Friends of the Loews, and that's not correct, and it's very disturbing. This is an important monies, $750,000 that FOL got into the building, and now at least $500,000 of that is in jeopardy. We're worried.
And the city has asked you to give an accounting of monies they claim they have given you over the years, which you say, of course, they haven't given you. So.
The city at one early meeting under the Phillips administration said they had no accounting from us of all the monies the city gave us, and I had to answer in all sincerity, there's a simple reason for that. The city has never given us any money. I don't believe there is a check from the city of Jersey City to Friends of the Loews in the amount of $5 ever. Certainly not in any significant amount of monies for the code work that they were supposed to fund. They just never gave it to us, and that's why the theater isn't operational now, more operational now.
How many volunteers does the Loews have at this point in time?
On our volunteer list, we have several hundred people, and on any given day, depending on what's going on here, you'll find 4 or 5 to 30, depending on needs, either show needs or renovation needs. Over the years, we've had over 200,000 hours worth of volunteers contribute time. That's a significant and enormous economic value if you want to put it in dollars and cents. I believe the U.S. Department of Labor has a dollar figure they put on the value per hour of volunteer work, and that goes over to well over $2 million. And that's just a generalized number, but that gives you an idea of what Friends of the Loews is contributing to this project.
And where are these volunteers from? Is it not all from Jersey City?
No, some are lifetime members, born and bred of Jersey City. Others are newcomers. Many of the people who volunteered with us moved to Jersey City and wanted to find a sense of community here, and they found us. Others come from as far away as Queens or further because they understand what we're doing here. They understand the goals of Friends of the Loews, and they want to help.
They sense the lifeblood that the Loews gives out. So that's a very interesting comment, Colin. What do you see? This is 2014. When would you like to see the Loews in operation? Do you have any projected date in mind? That you and the friends would.
Well, to be honest with you, if the city would work with us and come up with even some of the funding it's supposed to, this building could be, if not fully, then 90–95% functional within, say, a year and a half, 2 years at most.
Which would coincide with the development that's taking place across the street.
Exactly.
And it's kind of interesting because that's going to bring in another possibly 3,000 to 4,000 residents into Journal Square, and these people really would have nowhere to go other than, say, New York, for their
You want to get them out of their towers
Right.
and coming over here, but you also want to continue to build on what we've done. All of our shows attract people from throughout the region, including New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, all of New York City. We want to increase that as we increase the size and number of shows we do.
And I think along with that will come a resurgence in the number of restaurants and other type of
Most definitely.
shops that would cater to a new and growing population here, and make it meaningful once again for Journal Square.
We don't want Journal Square, for all the new development, to just be a bedroom community.
Exactly.
We want it to be a destination again, and this is very much a part of doing that.
That's an interesting point because, at one time when people came to Journal Square, they came here basically as a transportation hub, but they didn't live in Journal Square. Now we're putting in like possibly 4,000 people who are going to smack dab in the middle of Journal Square, coming out at night, perhaps walking their dogs and just taking a walk through the neighborhood and realizing, what do I do now? So, I mean, the selling point here is obviously this theater, and it would contribute greatly to the enhancement of Journal Square and the city.
Very much
So
so.
that, along with the other things we mentioned previously about the Apple Tree House and the Peter Stuyvesant statue, I mean, these are the types of gems that Jersey City has and should recognize. And obviously, tonight will be, I hope it's mentioned, give people an update at the Preservation Awards ceremony, that people should get involved with the Friends of the Loews and contribute and make every effort they can. So again, I thank you. The Friends of the Speak NJ is thanking the Friends of the Loews and Colin Egan.
Thank you.
For talking with us today, and we wish you all the success in the future.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Colin.